Coming into 2026, this is likely going to be one of the more interesting vehicles you see out on the road, at least visually speaking. It seems to me destined as the car of the future for your next favorite TV show or movie, but it's so unique in its shape and, I don't know, I guess presence, that Polestar is not even really sure what to call the Polestar 4. On one hand, it's referred to as an SUV coupe. On the other, I've seen it written as a fastback. I'm going to stick with lofty liftback. But whatever you want to call it, this is going to be a big deal for the brand. It's going to slate under the Polestar 3 in terms of size, but outsell the 3, the 2, and the 1 likely in sales in the next coming years. That is until the Polestar 7 arrives. But don't worry, we're going to dive into that naming convention as well. While Polestar has a distinct design language, they don't have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to their front ends. It's not a scaled-up or scaled-down version. This one, I think, is so far the most daring, at least of the cars that have already been produced. Not only does this have a very sleek nose for something called an SUV, but it also has the most advanced version of a divorce headlight that we've seen so far, which is actually dividing those modules with body in between. Although, of course, the top end here is not anything other than accent lighting. Your headlights are going to be located down below. Before I talk about the visibility here from the rear, let's talk about the view that you and everyone else are going to get, because I think this is actually a little bit more interesting. Shape-wise, I get something like a Audi SQ5 Sportback, but that comes in about 6 inches smaller. This is about 190 inches, making it a few inches longer than you'll find in something like a Tesla Model Y. But you'll also get this seated between the Polestar 2 and the Polestar 3, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people because normally the numbers have something to do with the size of the vehicle. In Polestar's case, it's just when they released it. So 4 comes after 3, but is not necessarily related to 3. And actually, in this case, is barely related to 3 at all. The most shared parts are probably going to be those badges and maybe some different wheel designs. But until that Polestar 7 arrives, yes, that's the 7, which should come before the 6 and probably also the 5. That's going to be the volume number because it's going to be, well, a little bit more practical. This, in the meantime, is going to be the largest boot and the most space, and the way they make that space is interesting because the overhangs here are incredibly short, both front and rear. And the SUV coupe look is generally one where you sacrifice capability, or at least practicality. In this case, they've actually extended how much space you get in the passenger cabin by making that wheelbase a significant part of the overall size. It's not just the visual impact that either the body color molding or the plastic cladding have, you can also make a change here in your wheels and tires. The rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive comes standard with a 20-inch wheel with a 21-inch optional. That's the one you see right here. But if you get the all-wheel drive, you can also go for a performance package that gets you a 22-inch wheel, and you'll also see a difference over in the brakes, not just in the size of them, but also in the color. They get the nice yellow that Polestar is known for. Now for the unveiling or veiling of the rear window, depending on how you want to look at it, because there is in fact no rear window here on the Polestar 4. That means that this panel and this panel are the same design, same material, and if you want to look to the back of the car, you have to do so digitally through this pod here, housing that rear view camera. Of course, that goes directly into your rear view mirror, but that's not the only way that you can look backwards. If you put the car in reverse, you'll also activate your rear view camera, so you can get actually probably the most comprehensive look behind the vehicle of just about anything out there. And there are some pretty cool tricks with this rear view camera that I'll show you when we hop inside. And while I haven't had a chance to really test it out in some harsher environments, Polestar has, and they said no matter where you're at, this shouldn't be getting too dusty, dingy, grimy because of where it's located. We know that backup cameras can get really nasty, but this one here is not just tucked away from where everything is swirling around while you're driving, but also has a nice little cover around it. So things like snow and ice shouldn't really be building up around it. And if it does get icy, there is going to be some heat in there. But if your whole car is iced over, then your whole car is iced over, and you've got your own problem in that case. But as far as the rest of the rear end, it's just really smooth. You're gonna get a highlighted Polestar emblem there, though not lit like we find up front, although one of my favorite things is the sort of hidden button. Go ahead and click this. That's gonna open up your rear hatch, because of course we do have a hatch. This is an SUV. Let's talk about storage space, which I think there is plenty of, but it's not as tall as you'll find in most SUVs, which obviously is only going to be an issue if you like to stack really tall items, big, tall boxes. That won't work out. But I mostly travel with luggage, and this carry-on bag fits in here no problem. If I wanted to, I can tuck it on inside and fit probably 4 or 5 this way without issue. But if I wanted more space, I could either stand it vertically if I loaded the load floor to its lower setting, sorry, lots of low there. It's probably about 4 or so inches down below there, so you can tack items if you want to away, or you can go ahead and make the most of the space, or of course you can just fold down the seats. But the pass-through here is a little bit interesting. If I take these out here, you can see it's a 60-40 split, but to get back there I have to go through one panel, and that's going to be this one right here. Give it a sharp tug, and you can go ahead and pull this out and now actually see all the way through into the cabin of the car, because this is only a visual divider, not anything necessarily more structural. Then of course, fold down your rear seats and you've got what I would call a pretty usable storage space. You may have noticed that badging on here is pretty minimal. So what model is it? Well, it's a Polestar 4 with a 100 kilowatt hour battery. And I know that because of the decal you'll find right here on the side. And it's also got 400 kilowatts of power, and that means your total motor output, that's because it's all-wheel drive. That 100 kilowatt hour battery is on every single Polestar 4 you'll find, even if you get the performance pack, and that'll get you just about 300 miles. 310 with rear-wheel drive, 290 for all-wheel drive, though the performance package with those sticky tires, I imagine is going to go ahead and drop that a little bit further. Now, Polestar says that they are looking for ranges that you're actually going to be able to use and at speeds that you'll be driving, but let's talk about the power that's going to get you there, because we have a rear-wheel drive and an all-wheel drive, and let's start with the base model. That's rear-wheel drive. You'll find nothing under the hood except for that front trunk, and in this case it has 277 horsepower and just about 250 odd pound-feet of torque, which should get you 0 to 60 in about 6.9 seconds. Maybe not blisteringly fast, but certainly quick enough to go ahead and merge without any concerns. You want more power? You basically add that second motor up front with a mechanical disconnect so that we don't lose too much range. You now have 544 horsepower and just over 500 pound-feet of torque, and that's going to get you 0 to 60 in an estimated 3.7 seconds, which makes this the quickest Polestar they have ever built so far. I imagine there'll be more power and some quicker models coming down the line, but probably a little bit more expensive. If you find yourself burying your right foot there in the throttle, then obviously you'll need to stop more often than not. That means that if you pull up to a DC charging station, you'll be looking for, first of all, where it's at. You'll find that on the driver rear side. That's going to be a CCS combo plug, not an NACS plug. And that means that you'll have to carry an adapter, but Polestar does have access to this Tesla supercharger network, and they'll top out their DC charging rate at 200 kilowatts. Not top of the line, but that still should get you 10 to 80% in just about 30 minutes, and you'll be able to charge at home up to 11 kilowatts with the level 2. In terms of front seat comfort, some of that depends on which particular package you get. If you get the standard model, it's an 8-way power adjustable seat. If you get the Plus pack, it's a 12-way adjustable seat with things like extendable thigh cushion, and of course you can go ahead and save that here in the screen. Once you've got your seat and your steering wheel adjusted, although your steering wheel adjustments happen through the display, you have to go ahead and click the buttons here, no actual physical buttons here, then honestly, I find this to be a very comfortable position. It's a little bit strange though, because you're in a more car-like seating position, but sitting a little bit higher off the ground. Of course, this is a little bit taller than your traditional car, but it's still designed to have a sporty experience. And I, for one, really enjoy it. The only thing I wish is maybe I sat a little bit lower, but I actually sit within the space here really well. Sitting bolt upright, I've got glass right above me, and I've got at least 5 or so inches of headroom. So at no point does this feel cramped. Let's just see if that carries over for the back, because of course we do have that sort of unusual rear shape. And in the back, I have to say I am pleasantly surprised, because this weird shape has created just enough space for me. I sit really tall, and if I sit bolt upright, I'm still not touching the back, although that is a little bit of a qualifier here. I'll cover that in just a second. As you can see, sitting behind myself, I've got probably 5 or so inches of legroom, so no concerns there. Although, because this is an EV, I end up sitting with my knees a little bit higher off the ground than maybe I'd prefer. Not a ton of support here, but the seat itself is pretty comfortable. And it's one that you can adjust, assuming you got the Plus pack, because now I can go ahead and adjust this seat with more or less recline, but actually I'll go ahead and recline over there. So go ahead and fold this up. That's where I have my control. Now I've got this seat all the way back. Interestingly enough, I could go ahead and adjust that from the screen. So if you wanted or needed to, maybe this becomes the next best Uber, you can go ahead and adjust that seat as needed. And it's a little bit more reclined, but all to say that you can get this all the way back in a way that isn't going to be terribly comfortable for the passenger behind you. But as you can see, sitting upright, I still have just enough, I guess probably just about a hand's width with a little bit of wiggle room. And as I mentioned, go ahead and pull this down. You've got a center armrest. I've got 2 vents, and in this case, I also have a digital screen to adjust the 3rd zone of climate, which is me back here. And I believe I can also go ahead and change the songs. If I need more cup holders, slide this forward, or pop this forward, excuse me. 2 cup holders there. I've got a little bit of a tray here. It'd be cool if this was Qi wireless charging, but obviously that would go ahead and change the price. But let me talk about some of the interesting pieces, because I can go ahead and recline this and I guess incline this. If I tilt it back, it'll go quite a few degrees. But the problem is if I tilt this back and I sit back, I now am out of headroom. I have a great view of what's above me. That glass does go all the way back over my head, but I'm a little bit out of space. So if you're taller torsoed, things will get a little bit tight. But the other strange thing here is that these headrests in the back adjust, and there aren't a whole lot of those you'll find, especially in a vehicle of sort of this size. But when I lift it up, it doesn't lock in any particular position. So I just have to go ahead and move it, and it's no problem while my head is here. But if this is my seat all the time, and then I get out and someone drives it around, I'd probably have to go ahead and raise that again. I'm wondering if that's something that just happens on this particular one. These are pre-production. Currently they're being built in South Korea, on their way over here for deliveries in December. But those are just concerns for some larger folks, your family of adults, or you and your friends. Actually, I imagine this will make a pretty good empty nester vehicle. If you don't have the nest empty at this point though, you of course do have latch anchors. You'll find 2 each in the outboard seats, and you'll find tethers over on all of the seats here, so you can mix and match how you need to. This is going to be a plastic clip design, although it does seem like it's designed to stay in place. You'd have to probably wrench harder than I'm willing to do so right now. But obviously there is a ton of room right here. So go ahead and check out our initial measurements here to get an idea of how much space you would need, but you wouldn't have any issue fitting, well, I can't imagine any car seat back here, front or rear facing. It's not just unique on the outside, but also here on the inside, with a mix of screen, capacitive touch buttons, and a whole lot of different materials, all coming together in a pretty minimalist design. But let's start on some of these materials. In this case, this seat has a leather upholstery, which is perforated because, of course, we have some ventilated seats. That also comes in that plus pack. It is quite a one to look at. I imagine a lot of folks will select that option. It's a nice design. I appreciate the lighter color, but it's not the only texture that we get in here. Of course, if you want animal free, you can get that as well. There's some pretty cool knits available, but you'll also find this knit here in the door panel. This is made of up to about 90% recycled material as well, and it creates a nice, well, breakup from something that could feel very sterile very quickly. But in this case, it just adds a nice texture to it. That knit material is going to be found here on the lower portion of the dashboard. We do get some ambient lighting that you select based on the planets, not just on a wheel of colors. That's kind of a fun way to break things up. And of course there you're going to find some more speakers and some more textures to keep this a really interesting layout. But let's talk about one of the centerpieces, and that's going to be this touchscreen. Now, Polestar has spent a lot of time on this display. It's about a 10.5-inch unit, and it's their own software mixed in with Google Automotive, or I guess Google Automotive with their own textures. So this Google Maps layout is reskinned so that instead of having curved edges, everything is nice and square. So it blends in really nicely with the car. That's a small thing. One downside though is on release, this Google Automotive system won't be able to use Android Auto, but it will link up with Apple CarPlay. And since I am not an Apple user, I had to go ahead and use the native system, but so far it's worked out pretty well. They've also designed it so you can have a lot of widgets, and everything here is designed to be accessible, quick and easy, and customizable. But hopefully we had a chance to do a deeper dive on this. For the meantime, let's go ahead and move on to what I think is going to be one of the more important pieces, and that's going to be the screen you didn't expect or expect to rely on nearly as much. That's going to be here in the rear view camera. So as you can see behind me, I have what I would say is a pretty good view, and certainly a better view than you get in some vehicles, not just in the small windows that are back there, but also never worrying about obstructions, things extra large in the storage compartment, or people, or headrests, or anything of the sort. And one thing that I found super interesting, and honestly a little bit difficult to get used to for a second, is if I turn on a turn signal, I'll let you guess which one I just turned on. If you guessed the right one, that's correct, because the camera shifts over so you can see more off to the right. And if you want to go ahead and back up, go ahead and put the vehicle in reverse. There is your backup camera and a top-down view. There are lots of cameras around this vehicle, and they all seem to be getting utilized in a pretty good way. But here's one miss, and I have to say, Polestar, hopefully we can get this added as software in the future. A lot of vehicles these days have a blind spot camera. And when I went ahead and turned on that turn signal, even though that mirror shifted, I wish we had an image of what's happening off to the side, because if you turn your head, you're not going to find the ability to see beyond. You're just going to see that black panel instead of an open window. But that's enough for me right now, at least on the screen front. Let's talk about what else is happening, although to the naked eye, there's not a lot. And that's because this is a very minimalist design, and it gets even more minimalist if you go ahead and close this cover. And this looks really good in photos, but probably not the way you'll drive it, so I'll go ahead and open that back up. I got a charging cable hanging out there. 2 cup holders that do seem to have a bit of a staggered layout, so you might be able to put a taller one in here and a shorter one in here and have them be leveled out. Your main control is going to be right here in the center. Basically, it's your volume, left and right, and then play and pause, as you can very clearly see. And then my cell phone here sitting in the slot. Now, this slot is your Qi wireless charging mat. Now, we're not done with storage because you'll find a little bit more under this level here. Down below, we have some additional storage and some accessories available. They've got options for a tissue box holder, as well as a garbage can or a water bottle holder. But I have to say, from the driver's seat, this isn't the easiest for me to get into. So just know, if you planned on using that all the time, make sure that'll actually work for you. It might be a little bit tighter than you thought. And then, of course, down here in the center armrest, we have 2 USB-C ports and a little bit of extra storage, but not a whole lot of room, all things considered. Now, from the driver's point of view, you'll have 2 more screens to take a look at. One will be up there on the windshield. We do have a heads-up display here, and of course, a smaller display right in front of you, which is adjustable. Right now, we're looking at a map. We can also make things pretty simple. I imagine a lot of folks will be happy just right there. And then, of course, if you want to go ahead and use the advanced driver assist systems, we've got our camera located right here, as well as another camera located right up here. But you'll find those controls out on the steering wheel. They aren't going to be as labeled maybe as you would think, and actually some of these controls can change. If you are in your advanced driver assist mode, these will be different buttons, so go ahead and change your following distance and of course your speed. If you're not in that mode, it's going to change things like your regenerative braking capacity, as well as your performance mode. And here on the right side, you may notice things aren't necessarily labeled here. These functions can change depending on which mode you're in, but obviously they're going to navigate forward, backward, left, and right, change your song and your volume, those sorts of things. Go ahead and change your steering wheel and mirror positioning by selecting that button there on the lower inside. Click adjustments. That's where you go ahead and make those changes. Very Tesla-like, although maybe not everyone's going to like that similarity. But it does keep things from being cluttered. And trust me, cluttered is not what you're going to get on the impression here in the Polestar 4. Time to get the Polestar 4 out on the road, and we have put some miles on it out here in Texas. Not too many things are particularly close apart, and luckily we've had a number of different driving conditions. We're on a pretty easy road right now, but we did have a chance to do some serious canyon carving, and that's where this vehicle wants to be. I would call this incredibly athletic. It's trying to be maybe something like an NFL running back, where it's not going to be incredibly light and agile on its feet, so not a corner. It's not going to be quite as bulky, maybe like the Polestar 3. That's something closer to, I'd say, a linebacker. In this case, it's agile enough, but it's very confident in whatever it does. We're looking at about 5,000 pounds here, and 255 width tires, at least on the model we're driving right now. And I think it handled everything well, but obviously this is not going to be a top-end performance car, though the performance pack would go ahead and increase its capabilities. It's not just the all-wheel drive model that I drove. I also spent some time behind the wheel of that rear-wheel drive, and I have to say that does end up feeling quite a bit lighter with no extra weight there out on the front axle, but it's not quite as quick. We tested it, and it did go a little bit quicker than Polestar said it would. About 6.7 is what we got, but wait till we get it back home, or this model, either way, so we can do some further testing on our home turf with some more comparable numbers. But either way, putting it up faster than the manufacturer says is always a nice touch, and something we see pretty often when it comes to Polestars. It also felt really nice and nimble, although it does have a different suspension setup. Well, the layout's the same, but it doesn't have these semi-active dampers that we get here in the all-wheel drive model, and I have to say the ability to tune those up or down, tighter or a little bit softer, is really nice to have, though the stock suspension, the rear-wheel drive model, comes in probably between what this would call the standard and the nimble setting, though nimble then just goes to firm, so not a whole lot of variability. Either way, I have to say, happy with the package as it was. But admittedly, if you want performance, look at that all-wheel drive. There was one downside, but I can already tell you the solution. We tested this 0 to 60 as well, and we were able to get it under 4 seconds, but not quite the 3.7 that Polestar says. Though the issue was pretty glaring and obvious, it was traction. We do not have the summer performance tires here, and we ran out of traction every single time. There was wheel slip on every launch, and I suspect with the stickier tire, that problem is solved. But even after a full day of driving, this has ended up being pretty comfortable. I mean, we've done hours and lots of miles, but the seat has been nice and supportive. The suspension has been communicative without punishing, and even though there are more advanced systems out there, this feels certainly good enough for the price point and for the user experience. I think anyone shopping a Polestar understands that we're not getting a cushy ride. That's not the intended use of this vehicle. It's meant to be sportier, but one experience I expect a lot of folks are going to be curious about is going to be the driving without a rear window. And I have to admit, it's taking a little bit of getting used to. I've driven a lot of vehicles with a digital rear view camera, and I have to admit, they're not my favorite. I will turn it on if I have people in the back or something obstructing my view, but beyond that, I'd rather look at glass. So it's taken a little adjustment, but it's been easy enough to do. If the screen is the only thing there, then that's the only thing I'm looking for. So after a few minutes, it didn't bother me at all. But one thing I definitely think should be added are going to be blind spot cameras, because the cameras are already there. Just turn on the software so when I turn on my turn signals, it shows me what's behind me. Because I can check over on my left side, no problem. But if I want to check deep on my right, I run into a black panel. And that's something that it does take some getting used to in a way I just don't want to. I want to be able to double check, because these mirrors, while pretty aerodynamic, are also not terribly large. So there's a bit more of a blind spot off to my back right than I would really care for. None of it's terribly concerning. I just have to say there are cars with better visibility, and if that's a very important feature to you, just know this might score a little bit lower on your personal scale. But another thing I really like is that the Pilot Assist is built in as standard on every single model, and that means your hands on the wheel, adaptive cruise control system, the ADAS available is actually not just easily accessible because it comes standard, but it's been pretty good so far. There are a lot of cameras, and in all the software work that Polestar has put in, which does seem like quite a bit, they show you what the car sees in a way that is really communicative and I think confidence inspiring. Because the biggest question, if your car is going to do things like change lanes or speed up or slow down based on cars in front of you, like a lot of these systems do, are, does my car see what I see? And then the question is it going to respond to the way that I would respond? The answer to that is probably no, but at least you can tell if it knows there's a car in front of you so it can start braking or not. So while traffic slows down my speed, let me slow down the tempo a little bit and say, who's this car for, or what do you shop against it? And at the price point here, let's say in the high 60s for a higher performance trim with obviously a few features included, there are a lot of vehicles that could fit into that category. Just the other day, we were driving the Optic V, and even though that's a little bit more expensive, if you wanted to go feature for feature, you could certainly do pretty much a match there. A Tesla Model Y is still going to be a crossover and probably have a little bit more usable space than here, but not more usable passenger space, so that's up to you. And there's of course a performance model of that. If you didn't want the performance, then there's a Model Y and a Model 3 and an Ioniq 6, an Ioniq 5, obviously a Genesis GV60 as well, though and that one's probably going to be a little bit small for some folks. Either way, I think the point is there are so many of these to consider, and I love it. I love the fact that you don't just have one. It used to just be Tesla or a Nissan Leaf, and obviously that was not the cross shop of the century. So do you take a loaded up version of this or a lower end alternative at BMW, or maybe a higher performance version like an Ioniq 5N? There's a lot of ways you can slice this, and I'm really glad we have so many choices. I'm really glad I get to spend time behind the wheel of each and every one of these, because judging a car just by the numbers doesn't do a very good job of creating, I guess, a solid comparison. But one set of numbers that ends up being pretty concrete is pricing. If you find yourself intrigued by the Polestar 4, like I am, and are in the market for a new car, which I am not, you can get this before the end of the year. They should be arriving at your Polestar dealers or your Volvo dealers, whatever that connected relationship looks like near you, before the end of the year, early December. And since this is going to be the most affordable Polestar out there, it makes sense that it starts under $60,000, but not too much, $57,800, and that is as delivered. If you want all-wheel drive, that's obviously going to be increasing cost, $64,300. And if you want to load this thing up to the gills, you're looking at just about $83,500, which I don't think you really need to, but you certainly can if you want to. And that means things like the performance package and the matte paint colors and every feature like body molding and the electrochromatic roof, which probably is worthwhile in my opinion. Either way, you get to build this just about however you want to. And while it's a really large range of available personas, of available features, of what's important to you, I think at the end of the day, we're going to be a better society if we have more of these on the road, just because they are pretty interesting to look at. There are a lot of EVs that I know people are a little wish-wash on. This one I expect will probably have the same thing, but probably more positive than negative. But whichever you are, let me know down in the comments below. And if this has been enough to pique your interest and you're gonna go take one for a test drive, let me know the features that you're most interested in, because there is a lot going on here. I suspect folks who aren't interested, things like that digital rearview mirror are probably gonna throw them off, maybe a little bit too much software. If that's you, of course, let me know in the comments, and if there's something I missed, I'd appreciate that feedback as well. I'm not able to beam myself out of here, so I'll have to take my NCC 400 kW on the way out on the road. But if you're curious what I thought versus what Alex thought, go ahead and check the link in the description. You'll find Alex's drive of this just about a year ago. And there's a pretty good chance here in the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about this drive and our shared experiences on our podcast, the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast or find our YouTube channel. Obviously here, I'll link that down as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all for me. Till next time, I'll see you down the road.